But man, when I look back now and think about skills that I have and things that I've learned how to do, some of the drive and things that inspire me came from a bunch of those guys.
Welcome to the Run to the Hard podcast, where we're here to remind you that God doesn't promise us a life free from suffering, but he always brings healing and restoration on the other end. Our goal is to inspire you to face life's trials with courage and trust in God's plan. And oh yeah, run to the hard that God allows.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Run to the Hard podcast. And our mantra around here is that we would talk about the hard places and the tragedies that we've experienced in our own lives, let God do amazing work in our lives, and then to be able to go out and serve others well and find them in their tragic spaces and hard places. And so if you don't know anything about our podcast, this podcast is in honor of my wife, Michael, who died tragically from a 4-week cancer diagnosis. And so her mantra of running into the hard is what we try to do. And so today, I actually have a friend and a neighbor, Josh Hardman, and Josh has agreed to come on the podcast this week and share his story and what God has been doing in and through his story. And so, Josh, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
You had a chance to speak in church for the first time in your life a couple weeks ago and share a little bit about your story. Tell me about that.
Yes.
Tell me about that and how that felt.
That leading up to that whole thing, but it's not something that I feel comfortable doing, being center of attention or anything like that. But it's so odd how the Lord works in our lives, because I previously had been praying. I just felt like all that the Lord has done for me, I felt like I wanted to be doing more for the kingdom, whatever it would be. Almost felt like a silence a little bit. I didn't know what he had in store for me. And then that kind of opened up. As much as I really was not comfortable doing it, Leanne and I, my wife, did it. And man, I don't regret that at all. Doing it made me look back on my life even more and see all the places that the Lord had stepped in my life and provided for me and led me down paths that I just have to give all that to him, all
Sure.
that glory. Yeah.
Yeah. Reflection is hard sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Looking back and trying to dig up some of that stuff from the past. Well, the crazy thing is you and Leanne were literally on my list before you spoke in church. And a friend of mine said, "Hey, Josh and Leanne, gave their testimony at church the other day. You got to go check it out." And I was like, "Oh man, I was going to have them on the podcast." But anyways, it's all worked out. And
Good.
we've discussed and talked about, how we would do this. I'm so happy we're getting to do this and getting to share not only your story, but I think we're gonna grab your wife and talk about her story as well.
Yeah, she has a story for sure. Of course, we
and-
all do.
But the two of you together, you have a story together.
Yeah.
You do. Well, let's back up. The reason we know each other is because we both moved into one of the most amazing neighborhoods on the planet.
Amen.
And I don't know how to tell people that. It's hard to get in here because nobody moves,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the people have been here now for quite a long time.
Yep.
And they've raised their kids here. And tell me about when you moved into our neighborhood and just kind of started experiencing people coming to your door and you freaking out a little bit about all the Christians in the neighborhood.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, for those that don't know my wife, Leanne, she suffers from a very debilitating disease. And, she's had to quit work, quit driving. I'm not going to tell all that because that's her story to tell in the future, I'm sure. But we had come up to a point in our lives where, we wanted to get out of town. Another reason is I was an alcoholic at the time, and, the bars are just too close, and we just needed to get out of that lifestyle. So she started looking for homes. She found one there in the Wampler Hills subdivision, and I liked the house, but I did not want to live in a neighborhood. I was kind of more of a private person, and as we kept looking and looking, I mean, it was something we could afford, and I realized, she's going to be home more than I am, so I want her to be happy. So we did purchase and got moved in. You know, like you say, the neighborhood is so open and friendly, and they started being very open and very friendly and coming over and introducing themselves and stuff. And it seemed like every conversation, it was good conversation, but it would always lead, where do you go to church at? And, are you a Christian? And, well, we go to the Heritage Nazarene Church. And really bizarre how it all led up because it's like I say, it was one person after another person and another, and they all go to the same church. And I just remember thinking, what in the world did you get me into here, Leanne? It's like a crazy cult in this place. And I remember one time she said, all these people were fine. And I was joking. And I said, yeah, wait till the first full moon. They're going to be out back sacrificing animals. And, but my goodness, I just can't say enough about, them. They weren't pushy or anything like that. But it ended up leading us to the Lord in the end. So hats off to them. They did their due diligence for the kingdom.
Yeah. And we have a hero amongst us. One of our closest friends is Wendell Brown, Pastor
Oh
Wendell
my
Brown.
goodness.
And I
Yeah.
know he was so instrumental in the two of you finding Jesus.
Yes.
Yep.
Before we even started going to Heritage Nazarene Church, we were in a small group with one of the neighbors, the Van Hoos family. I really took a liking to Terry's, just a great guy. So we started a small group there, and it kind of was going over every week what was discussed the week before at church. So Leanne and I just kind of made a decision that if we're going to do this small group, we should probably go to the church and know what's going on. Man, the first time I went in that church, Pastor Wendell he was in his mode that day, man. It's got such a passion for the Lord anyways. And man, he grabbed a hold of me that very first day. I mean, I didn't give myself up to the Lord that day, but I felt the presence of the Holy Spirit first time I went to that church.
That's amazing. Well, one of the things that drew me to your story is that, we both have very similar stories, different, but similar. We both grew up without a dad.
Yep.
And we both grew up with incredible moms who sacrificed and did so much just to provide food on the table and keep us alive as kids.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And
Yep.
even though we're in two different parts of the country, we don't know each other. We have very similar backgrounds in that. But let's just go there. Tell me about, as a kid, tell me about the tragedy in your family's life. Tell me about where it led you. What happened to mom? How did all of that begin?
Yeah. I'll be honest, I blocked a lot of that out for one reason or the next. My dad suffered from mental illness. He committed suicide when I was 6. It did something to me, and I don't want to sit and talk bad about my dad or anything. I don't remember a lot about him. When he died, there was just so much sadness in our family. The way he went, he was 31 years old, left behind kids. And my mom, she lost everything. We lost our house. We were living out in Logan Elm School District, and we had to move to a trailer park in Circleville, which worked out for me okay. There's a lot of kids in trailer parks. But the weird thing with that was about the time I was making friends at that trailer park, starting up a new school district in Circleville, my sister and I go to get on the bus, and the particular school that trailer park goes to, they were over capacity. So we couldn't go to that school. We had to stay on the bus after they dropped the kids off and go to a different one, a different school. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, and there was just so much of that kind of thing going on. I just, my little brain couldn't keep up with it. And I had so much anxiety in my head. It really set me back in school. I struggled. I honestly think that first year in Circleville, I should probably have been held back, but I wasn't. And just, got passed on grade after grade. And so by the time I got into adolescence, I started going down bad paths, really.
Tell me about your mom, because we're not alive today if it wasn't for our
Oh,
moms.
yeah. Yeah. My mother, how she managed to pick up the pieces, and she did. Man, she just full steam ahead. There was a lot of sadness in our family at that time. And imagine losing everything that you have. But she did. She provided for us. She gave us such a good life. We didn't have a lot at all growing up, but we had everything that we needed.
Sure.
My mom just worked herself to death to provide for us. And still to this day, I mean, she's the go-to. She's the go-to grandma. If anyone has, emotional issues, they go to her because she's
Isn't
full
that
of good
isn't that
advice.
crazy? Because that's my
Oh,
mom.
yeah.
That's my
Yeah.
mom. My
That's
mom's
awesome.
80 years old, and you can't believe the young people that show up at her doorstep even to this
Yep.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, of course, I don't really know your story so much, but I think with the trials that they went through, they've got some good answers. That's what leads you to be the person that you are, is going through trials, and they've went through them.
So you've told me before that you get to high school, you're kind of off doing your own thing.
Yes. Yeah, and it wasn't good. I skipped school so much. I had a friend who had an older sister, and she would just call in and pretend that she's my mom, and I don't even know if you could do that nowadays, but yeah, I mean, I was probably out of school more than I was in, and it was bizarre thing was, seemed like when I was at school, I was in their in-school suspension curriculum for skipping school. It was just terrible, really. And it led academically, I was in pretty bad shape. So I had no idea what path I was going to go down at all. There was no way I was going to college. That was out. So it was
S-
probably military or.
Yeah. So when you look back, because I know for me, I never really dove into those hard places of childhood until I was an adult. But when you look back, the death of your dad, how much do you think that played into all of the things, whether it was alcohol or skipping school or hanging out with friends? Like, if you look back, how much of that was a result of you pushing back, pushing down,
I'm
struggles,
sure it
mental
was
things?
it was a lot, yeah. I mean, when you're a little kid, I think you need your mom, you know what I mean? But
Mhm.
as you start to become a teenager, especially a young man, you need your dad there.
Yeah.
You need him for discipline and guidance and advice, and I did not have that. Yeah, so I just kind of went on it with my own thing. I mean, my mom definitely tried to step in, but times like that. That's one thing I look back and kind of regret. I wasn't really good to her at that time. I was rebellious, and she always used to say, "You treat the ones that you know is going to forgive you the worst. Sometimes, they get the brunt of your
Isn't that true?
anxieties and
Yeah.
aggravations." And she's right. I gave it to her, man.
But then something happened. You get out of high school, struggle to figure out what to do with life, and then honestly, a miracle happens. You get a dream job that you could have never imagined.
Yeah, I found out that there was gonna be an open position at the old General GTE telephone company. I think I was 20 years old. Of course, you had to pass an electrical test, and I honestly, again, it's a God thing. I don't know how in the world I passed that test, but I did. They hired me, and I wasn't sure where this is gonna go, but, I just remember going in my first day at the job, there was this huge age gap. So here I am, 20 years old. I'm a new hire. The next guy, age wise, was 40. And then it just went up from there. And man, those guys, and there were so many of them back then. Now it's a skeleton crew, but back then there was quite a few. And they were just such a tight knit group of men that they hung out after work, helped each other out with projects. But there was a few of them that really took me under their wing, and they just taught me so much about life, how to do things that a young man should. I didn't know how to change oil in a
Mm.
lawnmower even, but I learned so much from them. Because back then you didn't have YouTube to look how to do things, and those guys just, whatever you were working on, there'd be one of them that knew how to do what you wanted to do, and they'd take the time. That
Yeah.
was the big thing. They took time, and yeah, they were so good to me.
God gave you a bunch of dads.
Yeah, basically, absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah,
when you
that's a good
look
way of
back,
looking at that.
yeah, because that's part of my story is when I've shared my story through these podcasts, like my mom was in the same boat. She was just worried about keeping food on the table. She didn't know where I was most of the time.
Yeah,
I'm just
I
out
believe
doing
that.
whatever and trying not to get in trouble, but I found it. I was the kid who, if there was trouble to get into, I could find it.
Yeah,
And so God kept putting men in my life the same way to help guide and direct. And at the time, I didn't know. We're just doing our thing. But man, when I look back now and think about skills that I have and things that I've learned how to do, some of the drive and things that inspire me came from a bunch of those guys.
yeah,
Really did. And so, yeah, that's why I was drawn to your story. Hey, Josh, let's not gloss over the suicide piece. You experienced it as a young child and maybe don't remember all the pieces that went with it, or maybe haven't even understood why somebody could or would want to do that with so much at stake. And so I don't want to gloss over that because you and I rub shoulders with people all the time, and
yeah.
people we know have had these thoughts. People we
Yes.
know have struggled with this idea that life is so bad that I can't do it anymore. And I want to encourage people to, it's the wrong thing to say, just go get help, right?
Yeah,
But it's the
correct.
right thing to say, what our mantra is to run into that hard and try
Yeah,
to understand it and try to understand why and understand where and understand how. And so, God is the ultimate healer, but we almost can't get the help we need until we understand or can go to that place. So Josh, having experienced this as a son, as a kid, what would you say to a dad, to a mom, to somebody who's struggling with this? Like you've experienced what happens on the other side of this. Talk to that person.
yeah. They say suicide's most selfish thing you can do, and there's truth to that because you leave people behind that struggle and they need you. And you might think, oh, nobody would miss me, but they do. There will be somebody that misses you that feels responsible for your actions that they could have helped you or whatever the case may be. It wrecked my world for several years. I have a best friend from high school that we're still friends to this day, and he tried to commit suicide. It's been a challenge to get him to where he's at today. He's doing a whole lot better, but he had to tack this head on and be intentional and real about the situation. You got to get that help. There's help out there, and never overlook the Lord to provide that. You may not think he's the one helping you, but he'll open that door that you need, or someone will just say those words that you needed to hear that day.
Sure, sure. So then there's a flip side to this too. And, we've had people in our lives that have, because the Holy Spirit prompted them, texted us, called us, inspired us on the day, in the moment that we needed it the most, right? I mean, we've both experienced that in our lives where we got the right text at the right time at one of the lowest points in our lives, right?
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
not only is the person who's going through it need help, but we have to do our part. And
yes,
I'm trying so hard at this. This is something, I'm not going to say it's a struggle. It's a discipline that I'm trying real hard at, is that when the Lord gives me a name, don't think about it. Don't hesitate. Don't wait. Just text him. And I'm trying to do that more and more and more. Why would the Lord give me that name?
yeah,
Does that make sense? And so,
yeah,
doing this podcast, we have a lot of widow friends and widower friends. And so I'm trying to reach out. How you doing? What do you need? Can I help you?
yeah,
And then just friends. I've had so many people do that to me in some of those darkest moments where I needed something and it was their text that was like, thank you. And I look back at those moments and think, I could have been that guy.
yeah,
I could
absolutely.
have I could have slid into that spot. I could have thought life was hopeless. But over and over and over, God gave or put somebody in my life at the right time.
Sure.
There is help and there's a God, and there are people that need to pay attention. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Run straight headlong into the hardest thing of your life and invite Jesus in to do a work right there. And I'm telling you, it works. My wife taught me that.
She was certainly an amazing woman. And, I didn't get to spend a lot of time with her, unfortunately. I met her at the loft there once. And man, just the first time I met her, that is a true follower of Christ right there. You could just tell. And of course, in our neighborhood, I got the honor to be in that group of people that was praying for her in your front yard. What an amazing woman she was.
Well, we're still trying to honor her legacy.
Yeah.
That's the impact she left on me, or kids, and a lot of other people. And so it's kind of why we keep doing this.
Yeah. I just remember one thing she said, which I didn't hear her say this, but it stuck with my wife, and my wife still occasionally brings that up, is she would ask, am I dying? Oh man, that's what a tough conversation that had to be with you even. I guess, she definitely did it right. So,
Yeah, she did. We're going to get a chance to talk to your wife. I'm excited about that. Your wife's one of
yeah.
my heroes, man.
Oh man, she's
I've
tough.
told her that a half a dozen times. Like, she just keeps going.
Yeah.
And so can't wait to share that story. All right. So you got these old dudes in your life at work.
Yep.
You're just a punk kid.
Yep.
Tell me about how you met Leanne and
Okay.
how all that came together.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, these guys, like I say, they were great. And of course, I'm still drinking and partying every chance I get. That was just kind of my goal in life at that time. And they would get on me, but as much as they were father figures, they weren't my fathers. So I'm going to do what I want to do. There was one guy in particular that I rode with a lot every day. And a few years down, as part of my drinking, I had a failed marriage. It wasn't because of my drinking per se, but that kind of left me at another point where I was just ramping everything up, because nothing was working out as far as that stuff goes. As I started to get over that, that's when I met my father-in-law. That's where I met Leanne at his house, who I was working with.
It's his daughter.
Yes, it's his daughter. And then, she was going through a divorce of her own, so I would see her out at the bars and stuff like that. So we started to get pretty close, and yeah, that was a very sticky situation at work because I love him to death. And, he's, as much as I know he cares for me, he saw the life I was living and didn't want his daughter subjected to that, I guess. But yeah.
So the two of you obviously continued dating.
Yeah.
Like, how far down the road did you actually get married?
Pretty quick, really. I mean, not super fast, but I think we dated for, I don't know, a year and a half maybe, and then we were married. And I'm no joke. When I really got to know her, I knew right away this is the girl for me for sure. This is long before she's really having a lot of health issues or anything.
We're going to get into that.
Yeah.
Crazy thing is, Josh, yesterday on Sunday, I heard a message. One of my favorite Bible characters is Joseph. Just somebody who has been through so much. His brothers tried to kill him. His brothers sell him into slavery.
Yep.
He ends up having to serve like all these different people in Egypt. He's in prison. He serves the prison master. He's in Potiphar's house. He serves Potter. And I heard a message yesterday. Never heard a story of Joseph like this. But think about Joseph. His dad thinks he's dead because his brothers, throw him in a pit, sell him into slavery, go back and tell their dad that Joseph's dead, right?
Yep.
So Joseph is without family, no dad, no mom. He's doing his thing, working his hardest, trying his best to just not only survive, but he succeeds and does well everywhere he goes. But why is it that he succeeded? I never thought about this. Why is it that Joseph succeeded time after time after time?
I always wanted to honor God.
and men kept taking him under his wing.
Oh, that's true.
Dude,
Yeah.
I never thought about it.
I hadn't
Over
either that you
and
say that.
over
Yeah.
and over and over again, a strong man took Joseph under their wing and taught him everything they knew. And then he would get really good at that. And then he would, go to another place, and a strong man would lead him and teach him everything they knew. And I remember, this is yesterday, I was like, holy cow, never thought of it.
Yeah.
Used those men in his life to train him and give him the wisdom and the things. Ultimately, God gives him the strength and the ultimate wisdom, but all the skills, all the conquering over tragedy, I was blown away by it.
Yeah.
Because then I was like, oh man, Josh and I are going to talk about strong men tomorrow. And so I just had to mention that because, man, what an idea. How God used men in Joseph's life, and how God has used men in my life, how he's used men in your life. And they weren't all Christians, right?
No. Yeah.
No.
Absolutely.
But they taught us stuff.
Yeah.
They taught us stuff. And then God takes that thing and then wants to expand it and use it. So you get married, your wife starts having some illnesses, and obviously we're going to tell your wife's story, but your lives change. And
Yeah.
you still don't know God, you're not Christians.
No.
And then God literally puts you in this little neighborhood.
Yes.
So speaking about, well, let me ask you to do this. Imagine you're standing in front of a bunch of guys and you're reflecting on your own life. What would you tell? What would you say if you had the chance to stand before a bunch of men who don't realize maybe their little packaged lives are just great. Their little four walls, have a mom, have a dad, have kids, have grandma, have grandpa, all those things, What would you say to them about all of us on the outside?
Man, that's a pretty deep question, Curtis. I really don't know. That's something I've always kind of struggled with. Yeah, I mean, from what I've dealt with and how I was led to the Lord and stuff, you kind of got to get that edge, like that connection with people, and then I guess maybe doors start to open then. But if I'm telling a group of guys, I don't know. Enlighten me a little more on that question.
Well, you and I, we were fringe kids. Our world doesn't look like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Somebody from one of those worlds had to look in on us and say, I can help that kid. I can point him in the right direction. I can help. We're not talking about rocket science here.
No, I guess you're right.
We're talking about guys who just paid attention and gave us attention and took a little bit of time to instill something in us. You talked about, some of them guys just teaching you how to work on cars or things like that, which meant time. They had to pull you in.
Yeah.
And so every time I get on this podcast, I want to inspire somebody who's listening. Like maybe your world is busy and you got your own little life and you got your kids and your wife and your family, but man, they're kids just like you and I.
Yeah.
We need a dad.
Yeah.
We need somebody to look up to.
Yeah.
I
think you address a really good point. Just someone investing a little bit of time in you that could make all the difference in the world. You're right.
Yep. I know our pastors always talk about praying for our neighbors, knocking on their doors. It sounds so simple, but how many of us actually do it?
Oh, yeah. I don't feel comfortable in that environment at all. And I wish, some people can do that though. I mean, my neighbors kind of did that. And, when I look back, I mean, they've kind of laid the groundwork to show me what I need to do. But there's people at church that stop by. I'll drop a name, Leo Smithberger.
Oh, man. He's dropped by all of our doors.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Fearless, but he's fearless.
Yes, he is.
but it's something that he started practicing. And if you talk to some of our friends who know him, it's something he started practicing years and years, was listening to what people say, listening for a need, and then just going and meeting it. He'll show up, mow your lawn, cut your wood, that's the kind of guy he is.
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't want to get out of this episode without sharing that really simple truth that you and I stand before anybody because somebody took the time in our lives and were some kind of a dad figure. And ultimately for you, got you in a place where another man could take you in and lead you to Jesus. Crazy.
Yes.
Crazy good.
Very.
Well, I appreciate you sharing. I know we all have a story, and it's so easy to hide behind our stories or to push our stories down because we're embarrassed by them. It brings up hard memories. Or as a guy, we don't want to have to deal with that. There's things in front of me I need to be doing. But one of the things that my wife taught me when I was dating her was that all of these things in our lives are part of who we are. And she kept pulling it out of me, stuff that I didn't want to talk about. But why do you act that way? Why did you end up this way? Why are you interested in this? And I was like, that's a good question. She was so good at pulling the story out. And then the more I got to know her, I realized she did it it wasn't just me, she did it with everybody. She was so good at meeting somebody for the first time in a grocery store and getting to know their whole story. And she'd come home and tell me about it. I'd be like, how did you get that? They just told me their life story. She just knew how to ask the right questions.
Yeah.
And the more I do this, the more I realize that everybody's got a story.
They certainly do. And some people don't. They think it's not worthy of telling, but that couldn't be farther from the truth either.
And so now I realize that my story is what makes me who I am. And it makes you who you are. And it also makes us want to be and do more. You said to me the other day, well, you just said it a few minutes ago too, that you in your prayer life, you feel like God has more for you.
Yeah.
And there's more that we're supposed to be doing. I appreciate you coming on and just sharing part of your story. We're going to get a chance to do this again. We're going to bring your wife on and share Leanne's story as well.
Good deal.
Thanks, man.
Yep.
Appreciate you being willing to do this.
No problem, Curtis.
All right. Thanks, man.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to the podcast. Guys, please head to ratethispodcast.com/RTTH to rate the podcast. And if you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do so. And finally, third thing here, please check out the details behind the Michael Foundation in the link below. We love your support on this foundation and helping families stuck in grief with financial expenses. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.